Okay, last week I did kind of the topic about objective morality and the way that it's kind of fluid and goes along with changing times and human nature. I kind of went a little bit all over the place with that one because if I had tried to really outline the whole entire historical context to lay the groundwork for what I was getting at, it would have turned out to have been like a 3 or 4 hour video. So it just sort of kind of got scattered there in a couple of places. But I'm not going to reiterate that topic again. I think my point was kind of clearly conveyed anyway. But I did want to bring up this week something that I used to hear often in meetings from these so-called atheists and agnostics that were in Quackaholics Anonymous. A lot of them would often say that, to me, atheists and agnostics in a religious cult is almost an oxymoron. It sort of doesn't fit together. It doesn't seem like it would even add up. I used to watch these people try to play these little semantics games to try to come up with some way they could remain atheist and remain in AA. But inevitably, somebody would come along and they would say something like, you don't have to believe in a God to practice spiritual principles. Or they would say something like, practicing the principles of AA will keep you sober if you don't believe in God. And they would go on and on about, these so-called spiritual principles, which there again, atheism and spiritual principles, it just doesn't seem to go hand in hand to me. But it got me to thinking about it because when I did the way I covered last week's video, I said probably some idiot AA agnostic will show up and say that it's obedience to spiritual principles and practicing the principles of Quackaholics Anonymous is going to keep them sober, and following the traditions of AA is going to keep them sober, and that they don't have to believe in a God to do so. And I used to hear this one quite often, practicing the principles, obedience to principles. It's kind of weird to claim not to be a religion, but then they behave like they have the corner market on so-called principles. It's really funny. There's a video out there where a lady was stating why Christians should not go to AA. And her comment section was filled with all these assholes, and they were all, typing in all capital letters. I guess they were trying to really prove how hysterically angry they were about the fact that someone would dare say a topic like that. But they were saying, church never got me sober. AA did. Belief in Jesus never quite got me sober. AA is the one who led me to Jesus. AA saved my life. Christianity is for people afraid of hell. AA is for people that have been there. It kind of goes to show what I've said before is that first AA claims to be spiritual and not religious, but then they turn around and behave as though they're way above all the other religions. And it's funny, I'm not Christian, but it's very plain to see they think they're a cut above the brand of religious belief. Their proof, of course, is, religion won't get you sober. Religion cannot make you stop drinking. Only AA can. Bill said so. Bill said he had no monopoly on God, but if you disagree with his holy teachings, then you die drunk. Actually, AA itself, when it comes to a thing called spiritual principles and claiming that so-called obedience to spiritual principles is like a watertight security measure against getting drunk and dying, AA doesn't have the market on that, actually. All you got to do is look around the rooms at all the relapses and the suicides and the deaths that are present in every AA meeting. And of course, AA always has a convenient way to opt out of that by blaming the people for that. There's no such thing as a bad program. There's just all these people that really and truly don't want to quit drinking deep down inside. Otherwise, they would, get a miracle on demand from AA God that would remove the obsession. Stick with the winners. That means the ones that AA God has chosen to win, of course, which, it's kind of funny. Winning in their idea is sitting around in meetings the rest of your life talking about how helpless you are. And it's funny how no one ever has a clear-cut definition of how you're actually supposed to stick with the winners or how you're actually supposed to work this rigorous program. I've heard people talk about a strong program. I've seen people say, one of the reasons why I've never drank in all this time is because I work a strong program. What is a strong program exactly? I mean, the so-called winners that I used to see in AA, they were the ones that they sort of made a career out of chain smoking. And, I'm a smoker, but I mean, you'll see where I'm going with that. I mean, drinking coffee, exploiting vulnerable people, preying on newcomers. and generally just not succeeding at anything in life but being able to say AA stuff over and over again. I mean, I guess by their definition, that's working a strong program. That's obedience to spiritual principles. I mean, it's funny, they would go on about these principles, but they never, what I looked them up one time. What are these so-called spiritual principles? I mean, one of them was honesty, okay, open-mindedness, willingness. I mean, I don't know if they're aware of this or not, but the word honesty is not a spiritual term in nature, nor does it really have any connection to anything spiritual. I think that more falls along the line of being something ethical, okay? And there's been many philosophical discussions about what honesty even is, or if self-honesty is even possible. But I mean, I guess to keep it on a basic common sense platform here, I guess we'll look at honesty as being, you're not stealing from people and you're not lying to people. We'll keep it on a basic level. But even there, as it is, that's not a spiritual principle. That's an ethical principle, or not even principle. That's a question of ethics, telling the truth. I mean, it's not something radical that can't be achieved if you have a drinking problem unless you have a spiritual experience in AA. In fact, where does AA get off by claiming that if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, or if you have a problem with substance abuse, that somehow or the other, are they saying that you're incapable of having something like honesty, even remotely possible? But yet they'll tell you that you have to be rigorously honest to get sober. So in other words, you have to practice the principle of AA before you can even actually get sober in AA. It's kind of like a comment I saw earlier today. Someone said you have to quit drinking on your own in AA, in order to work a step, or in order to have a sponsor, or in order to have anybody actually choosing to do any so-called step work with you or anything like that. You have to actually quit drinking, only to be told that you cannot quit drinking without God and AA doing it for you. So you have to quit drinking to be told that you're not able to quit drinking. It's enough, when you really look at the bottom there, it's really an inherent. It's actually something that comes out of some kind of weird Mel Brooks 1980s style comedy. I mean, it's just so stupid. But as a matter of fact, when it comes to practicing spiritual principles, I remember this one guy, and he would browbeat the relapses really hard. He was like a permanent fixture at the group I used to go to. He would sit there really smug, and he would say something like, the program actually has a 100% success rate because the people who actually want this program succeed. But the only way you can succeed is by practicing these principles. And he would have to say that every meeting. He was one of those people that had to be called on every meeting. I mean, I saw a meeting one time where he didn't get called on, and he literally, sulked and left the thing early when he realized he wasn't going to get a chance to have his little 10-minute spiel. But the comical part about this dude, I saw him pick up a 1-year coin in that particular group, and he slipped up. He actually said that he had been coming to AA since September of 1977, and that it worked if you worked it. And September of 1977, I was sitting there, and it just struck me. I was born in November of 1977. So that means he had been in AA for 2 months when I was born. So he's been coming to meetings for my entire life. He's been coming there. Like he was there all through my grade school years in the 80s. He was there through my high school years in the 90s. He was there during my first job. He was there when I was a cab driver. He was there when I was in construction. He was there when I was in printing. He was there when my whole entire life behind me from November of 1977 up to that point, he's been coming to meetings. And he's just now got him a year coin. So he actually, it took him 40 years to learn that practicing the principles and wanting the program to succeed made him succeed. I didn't really have 40 years to try to do that. I mean, if it took me that long, I'd be 80 if I was going to start today on this crazy cult phenomenon. I mean, I don't think most people who are struggling with addiction and who are really wanting some kind of sure way to stop doing their drug of choice or their alcohol and booze or whatever it is, whatever their poison is, I don't think most people have 40 years of their life to sit around talking about principles. I mean, as a matter of fact, it used to kill me how I used to sit in meetings and people would talk about, how it worked if you wanted it to work. Now they would say that your own self-will, that what you want is inherently bad, or that you're incapable of being honest. But it would only work if you actually did the work and if you wanted it to work. So that really means that everybody who's sitting in AA is just there because they wanted AA to be the thing that made them quit. So therefore, they all quit drinking on their own. And it's not the program doing anything at all. It's just this is just like some performance art for most of them. Kind of reminds me of another dude. He was really melodramatic, and it was all a complete act. I mean, outside of the meeting, he was running a halfway house, and he was stealing from people. And he was also, when he would throw people out of the halfway house, he would confiscate their medications, and then he would toss them in the street. In fact, he had a whole closet full of pain pills and psych meds and everything else that he kept from all these people that he put on the street. I mean, he was a total fucking scumfuck. But he would sit in the meetings and he would bug his eyes and he would talk about, at 17 years I had a gun to my head. I was fucking insane in 17 years and I wanted to die. And and at the time that this was going on, I remember there was a homeless guy that used to come to the meetings every day, and he was, I think he was schizophrenic, but he was happy. He'd go around laughing. He'd have conversations with people that weren't there. And it must have been pleasant people he was talking to, apparently, because he was always in a good mood. And it was almost like this weird what's wrong with this picture type thing that you used to see in highlighter magazines when I was a kid, because I'm over here, I'm looking at this guy with 17 years and talking about how he has a gun to his head and he wants to blow his brains out. And then I'm over here and I'm looking at this guy who's completely schizophrenic, that doesn't even really know what planet he's on, that's talking to people that aren't there, and yet he seems actually happy, joyous, and free. So the crazy guy, he actually had it better than the AA old-timer dude over here that was practicing all these principles of rigorous honesty. Rigorous honesty and practicing the principles of AA, it makes you insane and suicidal. That's really a program of attraction and not promotion, definitely. So I mean, they behave as no one else on earth that's ever had a drinking problem is capable of doing anything in terms of ethic-wise with honesty or open-mindedness. I wouldn't even call open-mindedness a virtue necessarily. I mean, being open-minded to listening to new concepts, to maybe entertaining new ideas that doesn't necessarily line up with your own worldview, the ability to be able to discern information, somewhat non-judgmental, things of that nature. I mean, you could look at open-mindedness along that line. It almost I wouldn't call it a virtue, and I certainly wouldn't call it a spiritual principle. But it's not necessarily anything that you would necessarily. I mean, how do you practice open-mindedness? I mean, open-minded, of course, in AA just means swallowing more AA cult dogma. I mean, but I wouldn't necessarily look at open-mindedness as actually a good thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that people that listen to people like David Koresh and Jim Jones were open-minded enough to accept his teachings, if you know what I mean. And it really and truly, when you sound it all down and you cut it all down to the bare minimum with their holy big book full of bullshit, they're actually being dishonest when they tell you that you can get sober without a God and just practicing the principles. It's another reason why I get so annoyed with the so-called atheists and agnostics who are always occasionally trolling me and trolling other people like me on social media. And it always seems like that landline phone fucking rings when I'm doing one of these videos. But anyway, they're always trolling about like the possibility of reforming AA, or saying that AA can be done in theory, through the practice of spiritual principles. They're always saying that, it's not the religion that I make it out to be. And they're always coming at me from these angles. But really and truly, if you want to go by the very literature they wish to use, you would see that that's completely dishonest, and in fact, it's not even possible. I mean, they dedicate a whole appendix in the AA Big Book about spiritual experiences, and even garden variety educational ones. Now, what that really means in truth is that you didn't drink for a long time and you started feeling kind of better, and mistakenly you attribute not drinking for a long time and feeling better to AA. It's kind of like a YouTube comment I saw not too long ago where someone had written, if a group of people were gathering every Saturday to watch Huckleberry Hound cartoons and they found out they weren't drinking when they was going to do that, they would attribute the Huckleberry Hound cartoons to not drinking. It's no different than that in AA. But officially, if you look at the appendix in the back of the AA book, it's saying that you have to have some kind of spiritual experience of some sort in order to get sober. Now, of course, what they're really meaning is that you need their official stamp of approval, and that the spiritual experiences that happen to you have to line up with AA theology. In other words, you couldn't do like some film where some guy does a lot of peyote, does a Jim Morrison thing out in the desert and comes back and believes that the doors of perceptions are cleansed and everything appears infinite by, from the Huxley title. You have to have a spiritual experience that tells you that you are powerless over alcohol and that you need to sit in meetings and listen to sponsors for the rest of your life. That's what your spiritual experience has to be. In other words, if you did some meditation somewhere and you had some kind of interesting vibe, maybe if you smoked a little too much weed when you were doing it and you realized that all of AA was a lie and you don't have to do inventories for the rest of your life and examine every little minor detail of your life to see what kind of a horrible person you are, then they wouldn't give you the official stamp of AA approval. All spiritual experiences in AA have to confirm AA crap. Now, AA claims also in their little We Agnostics chapter, I think anybody who's been watching my videos for a while knows that that's a chapter that I truly hate. I used to really hate in meetings. I mean, my skin would just crawl in meetings when they'd start reading out of it, but it starts out in the very beginning and it says, if a mere code of morals or philosophy could have sobered us up or something like that, that we couldn't do that no matter how much we tried, even if we wished to. So in other words, it's saying that practicing spiritual principles, according to their definition of it, won't actually get you sober because they're saying just a mere code or a philosophy failed on every level. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I bookmarked that somewhere or where the hell would I have put that? I was going to actually look and see if I put it somewhere before I started this thing. I don't guess I did. Oh, yeah. And then it goes on further to say, we of agnostic temperament have had these prejudiced thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. What sort of results are they talking about? I mean, nobody in AA ever was a poster child for what I would call, an AA old timer and the word success just didn't kind of belong in the same sentence together. I mean, it was, I didn't really understand the stick with the winners line either along that same vein because, nobody in there really looked like they were winning at anything. And then it goes on to say, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with Him. Of course, they got Him and H capitalized. And as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe doesn't have a spirit. The universe is space and stars and planets. Underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. In other words, last but not least, we found that God does not make too hard terms with those who honestly seek Him. So, in other words, you can't really be a member of Quackaholics Anonymous and say that you're just practicing spiritual principles in order to stay sober and that your higher power is not needed. As a matter of fact, the very fact that you have to use the word spiritual principle there in itself should be a telltale sign for people who want to try to, who are sitting on the position of being like an atheist apologist for AA or something like this. I'm not going to read this whole fucking chapter, of course. The whole chapter is just cringeworthy. But basically what these little few sentences are saying that I outlined right here is saying that all you got to do is lay aside prejudice. Now, what they mean is lay aside rational thought. They mean lay aside logic and just seek him, and he won't make those terms too hard for you, and all of a sudden you'll get great results. So this is like a bribery system. This is kind of like a prayer racket. You know, you give God so much, you know, every week in points, and he being a, you know, like a, I guess he's like some kind of mafia boss or something up there. He deals you out a little sobriety, but he'll take it away from you at every time, at any given moment. All you got to do is stop asking for him to keep giving you these little sobriety things. It's kind of like these topics I used to see in meetings that the whole thing would center around surrender, and I would see somebody that had like 7 or 8 years of sobriety that had gone back out and got drunk again, and they would say, you know, I had given God all the power, but then I took it back. You can steal power back from God, apparently. Somehow or the other, you can rob God of what you freely gave him. But if God actually created you to begin with and set you up to be that way, then you really couldn't have him take anything back. It would be like God created alcoholics so that they would bottom out and come to AA and convert to Bill W.'s crazy religion and give up the idea that they had some kind of determination or self back to him again. And I think it's really funny when so many people that I've seen that are AA apologists, they'll sit up there and say that your higher power can be anything you want to be. All you got to do is flip through this whole entire thing right here. And I mean, the word God and him and many other titles are assigned through the whole entire book itself. You would think that if it was supposedly spiritual, if spirituality as it exists, if you want to believe in such a concept, and I still haven't found a good replacement word for the word spiritual. I mean, I don't know how to exactly what word I would use to describe my own current feelings, but I would say that would have to be that a spirituality thing, from my own perspective, would have to be a personal thing. It would have to be something that would be between you and you alone, and whatever it is you believe in and whatever lessons you would find there. It's really funny that AA claims that it's not a religion, yet your entire book here lays out an approach on how you're supposed to pray, when you're supposed to pray, what you're supposed to say when you pray, what you're supposed to ask God to do for you, how God's going to deliver miracles on demand for you as soon as you honestly seek him. And yet it claims that it's not religious when the entire book is nothing but a big workbook of how you're supposed to give up your own individuality, give up who you are and what you are, and just follow their simple instructions. Actually, that kind of fits a textbook idea of a religion. A religion tells you how to communicate with a deity. Anyway, I guess I've talked too long on this one. I'm not even exactly sure how many minutes it's been, but I think I've kind of made my overall point. I mean, anytime I hear someone throw that thing out there about, you know, you don't have to believe in God, you can just practice spiritual principles. No, you can't. I mean, if you looked at it 12 and 12, it's nothing but one big vehemently anti-atheist type thing. I'm not an atheist, but I think I just don't see how it would be possible that you could sit in a room full of people that preach an open hatred towards people who are atheists and claim that you can be a good member of that organization. It's kind of like how I said I'm going to cover a topic about how you can't really be a good religious person and continue to stay in Quackaholics Anonymous. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week, hopefully.